This happened around 10 years ago, give or take a year. Just found out about the subreddit and decided it was worth posting. My friend Craig and I made plans to hang out with our friend Jeremy and his new girlfriend. Neither of us had work the next day, so we decided to grab some beers and made our way to Jeremy's mom's apartment complex, where Jeremy was temporarily staying. When we got there, we went out into the woods behind his apartment complex to drink. This wasn't just a little patch of trees, but a good-sized patch of forest. For context, it was New York State. It was a nice day, late afternoon, and the sun was still out. We finished our beers and decided to get some more. So we go to the store, get some more beer, head back to the apartments, and enter the woods. This was autumn, and the light outside was right at the stage where it starts to very quickly fade. We underestimated how dark it would be once we were in the woods, and how fast the light was fading away. We planned on making a fire, but didn't really count on it being so dark when we got back. We're walking into this sort of clearing area from where we can choose to head off in a few different directions. We're having a good time, laughing, but something not too far in the distance catches my eye. It was too dark to tell, but I could swear it was a very large figure. No, that's too big. It's probably just a tree, or just your eyes fucking with you. So as Jeremy is gabbing in the background, I ask Craig if he could see something standing up ahead. He's like, nah, where? Oh wait, there. Oh shit. We were still walking and it was becoming clear I wasn't seeing things. This was a very large person standing in the forest up ahead, apparently facing us. So I try to get Jeremy's attention without cluing in the big guy that we have noticed him, in case something sketchy is going on. Which I was getting a serious feeling there was. We tell Jeremy that there's a person up ahead, but Jeremy is in a jovial no-chill state and he exclaims, "Holy shit, is that Bigfoot?" We humor him and laugh, but it's clear to Craig and I that this is actually creepy and probably not a safe situation. And it's clear that Jeremy is not understanding that. It's hard to communicate the pacing of our approach onto this guy, but essentially we had gotten too close not to acknowledge him. Partially because it took us a moment to get Jeremy's attention, and partially because we weren't trying to turn around and run like we were scared. There was 4 of us and 1 of him after all. But this was a big guy. Not supernaturally big or anything. And not like he was jacked or anything like that. Just a naturally gigantic dude, very tall and heavy without being particularly fat. And he was just standing there, in the middle of the forest, in the dark, alone. So as we approach the guy and just sort of say hello, Jeremy, the absolute fool he was, gets way too close to this guy's personal space as he enthusiastically tells him about how scary he looks standing in the woods alone. "We thought you were an alien or something, bro. I thought you were gonna jump out and be like, blah." Jeremy mimes an extreme set of teeth coming out of his mouth like a xenomorph from the Alien vs. Predator movies, all up in this guy's face. To be clear, Jeremy isn't trying to be intimidating or a jerk in any way. He was trying to be friendly and joking around with this guy. But he is literally leaning into this dude and practically sticking his hands in his face with his impression of alien. Did I mention that Jeremy's kind of a moron? Jeremy was kind of a moron. Love you, Jeremy. And Jeremy's poor girlfriend, who was a few years younger than us and very shy, was clearly terrified, to which Jeremy was also oblivious to. So Craig and I are both standing there, kind of trying to brainstorm a way out of the situation. Jeremy is clearly too dense to get it, and if we say we have to go, he'd be like, "What? We just got here. Aren't we having a fire?" And we were trying to seem confident and in control of our situation. The big guy says, "Oh, you guys drinking? I've got some drinks too." And he walks over to the tree line where there's a bag laying beside a tree. He reaches into the bag, and while he grabs a beer with one hand, he sort of sneakily pulls something else out with his other hand and places it in his hoodie pocket. I'm convinced it was a knife or gun. Probably a knife, in all honesty. He then reapproaches us and cracks open his beer. I glance around casually, and then I notice something else. Somebody else is out here. There's someone moving along the tree line to our left, a relatively good distance away, but someone else is here, and they're like circling around as if to come up from behind us. Fuck this. I need to leave now. So I go, well, I gotta go to work in the morning, and Craig's driving me home, so we gotta get out of here. Jeremy, in his infinite wisdom, responds, What? You said you didn't have to work tomorrow. I facepalmed him so hard inside. No, Jeremy, you must have misheard me. I said I do have to work tomorrow. And Jeremy, proving there's no end to his wisdom, says, Alright guys, it was nice hanging out with you. Get home safe. He wasn't leaving the woods with us. Craig and I start walking away, and I tell him about the other person circling to get behind us, and that we needed to move. We start trying to brainstorm on the way to get Jeremy and his girlfriend out of there, and decide to call him and tell him that his mom is out in the parking lot looking for him. Jeremy is terrified of his mom. Craig explains to me this should work, because we clearly couldn't just call him and tell him the situation was not safe without him blurting out, This guy isn't sketchy. I totally feel safe. Jeremy was very mad for us lying about his mom. I think his girlfriend appreciated it though. I'm not sure what was going on there that night. I've talked to several people about it over the years, and there's a few different ideas. Did they know we were coming back? Were they waiting for us? Or did we stumble into something we weren't meant to? Almost everything I could tell about this says, you guys actually interrupted a drug deal, but something about that just doesn't seem right. Who does a drug deal in the middle of the woods at night? I don't know. Very possibly a homeless dude with no ill intention, and another homeless dude with no ill intention. But it was a very creepy situation, and I just thought I would share. This happened around 2021, and sometimes I find it hard to grasp. For context, I now live in a different place, and along with most of my relatives, so I feel safe saying this on here. The reason why I'm posting this is for people to learn and possibly caution themselves from my experience. I said the place I lived in was pretty old. It wasn't densely populated nor empty. It had wooded areas around it. You could cycle to the mall, school, and other normal places, but you would have to take the car to get to places like the hospital, etc. I was basically in my last year of high school. Being an only child and a girl on top of that made my parents overprotective, and I was naturally more cautious than the rest of my friend group. I didn't really mind being that way though, because I always thought that was the better option. So teenagers from school would have these little get-togethers outdoors in the woods, a few kilometers away from the school. It was just common for people to lounge out and about, chill into 3 a.m. or something. Including me, it was a group of 4. They decided since it was their last year of school, we should probably drink together in the woods. Obviously looking back, stupid fucking idea, but it wasn't unsafe and it wasn't deep in the woods either. There was a pretty clear trail with a smallish opening area. We planned to do it on Thursday because my parents would be out and the rest would convince theirs that they were having a sleepover. We bought alcohol and some other stuff to just chill out. There were no others that day because it was a weekday and quite chilly. It was pretty lively. You could see houses from the distance and people would be driving around and all, so naturally we felt safe. We walked on the trail for about a minute when I felt uneasy. I felt like we were being watched or something like that and looked over to one of my friends. She looked a little distressed, but we shrugged it off. We walked only a few minutes more and found our spot. We started drinking and basically spent an hour and a half gossiping and having these deep talks while being drunk. I didn't drink too much and neither did my other friend. We were just a little tipsy. Now, we had forgotten about that brief weird feeling we had felt while walking until we heard something from the thick trees in front of us. Even though we were loud, we all heard it. It was like a weird snicker or giggle. I got up from the tree log I was sitting on and just dragged my friend back a little. We had a fire going and 2 torches, but we still couldn't really see in that area. It wasn't that close to us. Think about 4 doors away if you placed them horizontally, so the fact that we heard the laugh was just insane to me. I pointed the flashlight straight into the area and no one came out. I sat back down, and when I turned the flashlight off, there was a silhouette coming out. I switched on the flashlight to blind the person, while my other friends did the same. We started yelling and getting ready to run when I saw the most horrifying sight of my life. It was this man who we had never seen before. He had this plastered smile, and his hair was covered in dirt. He was pale, and his eyes were almost like he wasn't looking at us, but just in our general direction. I can't explain, but just textbook creepy. We all ran for it. My very drunk friends even managed to snap out of it. We got to my house. I lived closest to the place. We called the cops, but they found nothing. Word got out, and people pretty much stayed away from those paths at nighttime. And a couple of guys from our school managed to get their dads and all, with guns, to find the guy, but nothing ever came of it. Fast forward to like 1 month later. We didn't really talk about it that much, and never did anything like that again. I got a pocket knife and some pepper spray. I went home after school and was exhausted, so I decided to take a nap. My dad was at work and my mom was visiting her sister. I suddenly woke up to this weird sound. We had a 1-story and the walls were not that thick. I locked all the doors and even the windows out of habit, but still fearing the worst, I locked my room door and kind of looked out my window, but there was nothing. I grabbed a bat and my phone, heading out of my room. I looked at all the doors and everything was locked. There was this weird sound like shuffling coming from out of my house, and I looked through the window of my living room. I kid you not, it was the same dude from the woods. He was just outside walking in his erratic, eerie way, which sent me into a spiral. He somehow saw me and started saying, "Hi there," very loudly. I called the police, and after that, I told him to piss off, and he replied by saying my name and all my friends' names. The police questioned him. He had no clinical disorder, and after enough interrogation, he confessed to liking young women. He's in jail now for harassment, stalking, and a slew of other things. He will probably be getting out in a couple years. Last summer, I was camping with my partner and our 30-pound dog along a creek in a popular area in a nearby national forest. It was an established site, but not a campground. Parking spot, ring fire, nice flat area to access the creek. In the dead of night, we are woken up by a large truck parked by our car, just idling. Eventually, 3 men get out. They enter our camp. They're talking quietly. The truck in the creek makes it unable to hear what they are saying, but I'm pretty sure it's not good. Meanwhile, our dog had been growling lowly the whole time. Early on, I whispered to my partner to be quiet, hold the dog, and hide. I got out of our sleeping bag and put my shoes on. The only thing I had for defense was a forest axe, halfway between a hatchet and axe. Very useful for getting by in the woods. It had a leather sheath with a metal button latch to protect the blade. They took their time, perhaps as intimidation, but eventually they got closer to our tent. I loudly popped the metal button from the latch, taking the sheath off, preparing to become an axe murderer or be murdered myself apparently. All 3 heard the latch. My assumption is they thought it was a gun holster. They quickly left our camp, got back in their truck, and left without a word spoken. So yeah, Guys who wanted to have an impromptu murder party in the woods for unknown reasons. Let's not meet. I live in a small village 25 minutes away from the nearest city. It's a great place and great location. Nice and quiet with beautiful countryside, and nobody is a stranger. If the city calls, which it often does, as most of my friends live that way, then it's an easy bus journey, although it never runs on schedule. The most annoying aspect of living in this place? The bus that ran directly from the city center to my village makes its final run at 8 p.m., arriving at around 8:30. Now I was young and partying and drinking. This means 8 p.m. never happens, so I'm left with three choices. I can sleep on my friend's couch, I can get a taxi, or I can get a bus that passes closest to my village. On this particular night, I was 19. I had visited a casino alone and lost all my cash. This meant options 1 and 2 were out the window, so I headed up to the bus stop. The bus journey is super quick, even more so at 2 a.m. on a Thursday morning, and before long my stop was nearing. Unfortunately, being rather inebriated and dwelling on a poorly played hand of blackjack, I fell into a daydream, and although it was only for a second, I missed my stop. I quickly got up, pressed the button. A minute later, I'm at the next bus shelter over and deciding my move. It's December, it's cold, it's raining, the snow on the ground is turning into mush, and the dirty shoes of passerbys have diluted my lovely white with an unhealthy, dull-looking gray. An empty McDonald's bag tumbles by and piques my interest. I drop my cigarette and step off the curb to pick it up. Gray mush flows over my low tops, and now I'm miserable. It's a 5-minute walk back to where I should have left the bus, and a further 25-minute walk to my home. It's a well-lit road, and the road had been salted. There were no cars at this time, so I could have a relatively comfortable walk home, if not a bit lengthy. Or I could take a shortcut through the woods. It's sure to be muddy and dark, but it's 15 minutes quicker, and I'm already as cold as I can get. I should have gone the long way. I'd done this walk plenty of times, but always during the day, never in the dark. You start with a 5-minute walk through a path with a chain link fence on the left, separating you from the fields. The wall of a warehouse and spiked metal fence of a yard keep you in from the right. Next is under a railroad bridge and out onto a wasteland. Up until this point, I was feeling pretty comfortable. It was a pretty creepy place at night for sure, but I knew there was no one nearby when I entered the shortcut, so no one would be coming from behind me. And there's a faint glow from the lights in the factory yard that let me see what was ahead of me. I even had my headphones in. Until the wasteland. I'm standing in the open now. The cut is behind me. The empty factory is ahead of me. It's locked up for the night, or maybe it's abandoned. It's full of old rusted cars. To my right is a smaller wooded area, and to my left, a larger woods area. The ground I'm walking in is ruined by kids riding their quad bikes around in the day, and the rain has made it worse. The light from the factory is gone, and I nearly slip. I'm reminiscing about all the wonderful walks I had on a lit, salted road as my eyes adjust to the dark I'm now in. At this point, I got a strange feeling, and I was almost sobered instantly. Now, this feeling has been described plenty of times around here, and described well enough that if you haven't experienced it firsthand, then you should still have a good idea of what it must be like. It's the feeling that you're not alone. It comes from your gut, and let me tell you, when you should be alone, there's nothing more unsettling. I could have turned around and a light jog would have had me back where I started in 2 minutes. I'd have a half-hour walk, but I'd feel pretty fucking comfortable during it, compared to right now. However, I couldn't see anyone. I couldn't hear anyone. There's no way that anyone would be out at this time, and I'd laugh at myself as soon as I was wrapped up in my warm bed, which was 10 minutes away if I carried on. By this point, I had been thinking about what I should do for a couple minutes, and it occurred to my paranoid mind that by now, someone could be well on their way through the cut towards me. So I continued on quickly with my earphones no longer playing, just to be safe. The last part of the walk that can be considered creepy is a walk between the larger woods and the factory. The path was turned up, and puddles and sludge and cold water were more common than solid ground. It was so dark that I ran my hand along the rusted panels of the empty factory fence to keep me on track, careful not to lift my hand too high in fear of cutting myself on the barbed wire I knew ran along the top. To the left was the woods, and after a brief look into them as I entered the path, I decided not to look anymore. The trees were so bare and threatening, and it was so dark that I couldn't see more than 10 feet in. It gave the illusion that I was farther from society than I was, and I didn't like it. I sped up. Then I was falling over. I had kicked a large stone on the floor, and it had sent me tumbling on the ground. Luckily, I didn't land in a puddle, and it was no worse for wear as I got to my feet. Suddenly, a snap and a crunch sound. Even remembering that noise will ruin the calmest of my moods now. My eyes widened, and my stomach dropped to the floor. Instinctively, I spun around to see what had stepped out from the woods, and I saw him as he stepped out on the path, first facing away from me briefly, as if to check behind him, and then towards me. He's 15 feet away and tall, over 6 feet by a fair chunk, and he was broad. His hair was long and covered half his face as he hung his head, either looking straight at the floor or up at me. I couldn't tell. I was totally sober now, and although I was aware I was breathing heavily, I couldn't hear myself for the sound of my heart in my ears and chest. I wanted to say something that made me seem like I wasn't an easy target for whatever he wanted. What? Is all that I managed, and he just stood still, saying nothing. I didn't know what to do. I could run at him and fight. I could run into the woods. I could ring the police quickly. I did my best to calm myself to think clearly, but right then he started to walk towards me, slowly, but deliberately. He lowered his head further to the ground. I just turned and sprinted. I heard heavy splashes behind me and knew that he wasn't just walking now either. I just fucking sprinted, praying that I wouldn't be caught and praying that I wouldn't trip and fall. I ran from the woods. I kept sprinting up the hill through the dark park, waiting for his hand to grab my shoulder at any second. I sprinted through the streets and grabbed my house keys from my pocket. I jumped over my fence and got straight into the house, locking it immediately. I didn't look outside. I never peered back as I was running. I'll never know how far he chased me or how close he came to grabbing me, and I really hope I never know what he wanted. Big creepy man who was waiting in the woods to chase me. Let's not meet again. I've always been creeped out about this experience and figured maybe someone here might have some insight into it. My husband, boyfriend at the time, and I were camping at Harriet Lake, which is a small lake pretty deep into the Willamette National Forest. We were on a road trip from San Francisco to Vancouver, BC, and decided to spend one of our days exploring Portland for the first time, since our campsite was only 90 minutes outside of town. On our way back to the campsite, we approached a stoplight in the last town before the highway narrowed to one lane in each direction. At the red light, we pulled up next to a couple on a motorcycle. They looked to be in their 50s. The man in front was short and pudgy, while the woman was tall and lanky. I joked to my husband that they looked like Boris and Natasha from Rocky and Bullwinkle show. When the light turned green, they looked over at us, took off, cut in front of us, and disappeared quickly down the curvy road ahead. I remember us thinking we had pissed them off somehow because they were driving really aggressively. Soon after, we found ourselves deep in the forest. The windy road was flanked by cliffs on the left side and a sparkling, rushing river on the right. Several small, old, green metal bridges passed over the windy river. Cell signals quickly disappeared. The sun was setting, and there were only a few other people around, except for a few fishermen trying to get one last catch before the sun went down for the night. As we approached the last bridge before the turnoff that led to the campground, we noticed that Boris and Natasha were parked sideways in the middle of the bridge. As we got closer to them, we realized that they were staring at us as if they were waiting for us. I noticed Natasha was holding something in her hand. Whatever it was producing a fair amount of smoke. I thought maybe we had came across them smoking a cigar or a blunt or something. As we slowed down to prepare to pass them on the bridge, I got a closer look at what was in her hand and realized there was way too much smoke coming from it. Right as we were passing them, she tossed the smoking object under our car, then scooted off the bridge. They turned around and looked at us as if they were waiting for something. My husband had the quick thinking to swerve and accelerate out of there, and not a moment too soon, as the object exploded forcefully right after we had cleared it. Having failed to accomplish whatever their goal was, I don't know, disable our car and rob us, kidnap us, kill us, they sped off down the side road. While my husband was furious, I was totally freaked out. I was convinced that they were going to follow us, or they had been following us earlier in the day. I was 100% certain that they would return to our campsite in the night where we were defenseless in our tent and finish the job and get rid of the witnesses. Fortunately, we never saw them again. When I was a teenager, my friends and I used to pass the time by walking to the local mall and loitering all day. The mall was a good 30-minute walk from my parents' house, but it wasn't too bad. The path we went down was a lovely patch of woods, winding and twisting its ways. One evening when I was about 14, we were making our way home from the mall. A man had cleared his throat abruptly, and we turned around to find a middle-aged man on his bike behind us. How he had gotten behind us on the trail without us hearing his wheels on the path is beyond me. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, the man asked us if we found him attractive. Being a puffed-up teenager with a sense of greater badassery than was reality, I told him that he looked like he was probably my dad's age, and thus not our type. He frowned, nodded, and rode away without a comment. We carried on, our conversation strained now. When we came to the mouth of the path that would lead us out of the woods into a neighborhood, the man was just standing there, straddling his bike. He was sweating and squeezing the handles of his bike so hard his knuckles were there. We paused. He was in our way. He cleared his throat a few times and then asked in a haunting voice if we could show him our panties. We were both in skirts at the time. He said he wouldn't touch us. He just wanted to see. And that, dear Reddit, is the first time I remember swearing at an adult. I told him that he can fuck off because we were very near to my dad's place of work, and I had no qualms about screaming. He zoomed away on his bike in a panic. I never saw him again in that neighborhood or on the trail. So one night, me and my friends were playing hide and seek in our hometown. We were probably like 13 at the time. So I went in a small area that is basically a shortcut from the main road to the side road. I unfortunately went alone, and I didn't even think of what could happen. Remember, we were 13 at the time, and we didn't bring phones with us, so if something happens to us, no one would even know. So the game started, and I'm sprinting into the woods area. First 30 seconds was good. We have a rule that we have to come out to the checkpoint where we started, and we have to save ourselves from not getting picked to search. After around 1 minute, I start hearing footsteps and say, "Hello? Are you one of my friends?" And whatever was there didn't say anything, so I started backing out. Fortunately, the woods area has a main route and two sides, so I could run either way. I start backing out, and out of nowhere, a man just appears from the woods and starts sprinting at me while saying, "I'm gonna catch you," in a creepy and eerie way, like a kidnapper. Fortunately, I train in soccer, so I knew I would definitely outrun him, or at least make him tired. I sprint all the way from the woods with the only light being from the moonlight, and after around 2 minutes, he gave up. I continued sprinting and got myself all the way to the checkpoint and told my friends what just happened. Of course, no one believed me, but I didn't care, since I knew it was real. To this day, I still don't know who was trying to catch me that night, but for sure I know if I wasn't a sports guy, the outcome would have been very, very different.